The fluorescent lights hummed their lonely song through the empty corridors of Veterans Memorial Hospital as Marcus Rodriguez pushed his mop bucket down the polished hallway. 3 in the morning was his favorite time to work. The chaos of the day had settled into peaceful silence, broken only by the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle whoosh of ventilators keeping watch over sleeping patients. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle with practiced efficiency, each stroke deliberate and thorough. At 42, Marcus had perfected the art of being invisible. Hospital staff walked past him without a second glance, seeing only the navy blue uniform and the quiet man who kept their world clean. But Marcus saw everything. He noticed Mrs. Patterson in room 314 hadn't touched her dinner again. He observed how the new nurse, Sarah, always checked twice on the patients in the PTSD ward. Most importantly, he watched over the wounded warriors who reminded him of a life he'd left behind. As he approached the veterans' wing, Marcus paused outside room 287. Through the partially open door, he could see Sergeant Riley tossing restlessly in his bed, another nightmare gripping the young soldier's mind. Marcus had seen that same haunted look in bathroom mirrors for years after he'd returned home to raise Emma alone. Where in the world are you watching from at this hour? For those of you awake like Marcus, you understand that sometimes the night shift sees the deepest truths. The mop bucket wheels squeaked softly as Marcus continued his rounds, unaware that tomorrow would shatter the careful anonymity he'd built around himself and his 80-year-old daughter. Tonight, he was simply the janitor who cared a little too much and noticed a little too often. Tomorrow, old ghosts would demand he remember exactly who he used to be. 6 hours later, Marcus stood outside Roosevelt Elementary, his shoulders squared with military precision despite the casual jeans and faded t-shirt. Other parents chatted in clusters, but he remained apart, watching the school doors with the same alertness he'd once used to scan rooftops in Fallujah. Emma burst through the entrance, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward him. Her smile could power the entire city, Marcus thought, catching her in his arms and spinning her around. This moment made every floor he mopped and every toilet he scrubbed worth it. They walked home hand in hand, Emma chattering about her day while Marcus listened with complete attention. She told him about her friend Jessica's dad who worked in an office building downtown, about how Tommy's father coached Little League, about how everyone's parents seemed to have important jobs with fancy titles. What time is it where you are right now? Are you heading home from work like Marcus, grateful for the simple blessing of holding your child's hand? That evening, as Emma worked on her math homework at their small kitchen table, she looked up with curious brown eyes that reminded Marcus painfully of her mother. "Dad," she said, "why don't you ever talk about your job before cleaning?" Marcus's pen froze over the bills he was sorting. He forced a smile, ruffling her dark hair. "Some stories are for when you're older, Mija. Right now, being your dad is the only job that matters." Emma seemed satisfied with that answer, but Marcus knew her questions would only grow more persistent as she got older. The next evening at the hospital, Marcus encountered Sergeant James Riley sitting alone in the visitors' lounge at 2 in the morning. The 26-year-old veteran stared out the window with hollow eyes, his left leg stretched awkwardly from a recent surgery. Marcus had seen Riley's chart during his cleaning rounds, noting the Purple Heart citation and the long list of medications for pain and anxiety. Riley looked up as Marcus approached with his cleaning cart. "Sorry, I know I shouldn't be here this late," Riley said, starting to stand. Marcus held up a gentle hand. "No need to move, son. Sometimes the night is the only time that makes sense." Riley's shoulders relaxed slightly at the understanding in Marcus's voice. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes before Riley began talking. He spoke about the weight of coming home when others didn't, about nightmares that felt more real than waking life, about a civilian world that seemed impossibly foreign after 3 tours in Afghanistan. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally nodding with a comprehension that went deeper than sympathy. Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her expression stern. "Mr. Rodriguez, patients need their rest. Please continue your duties elsewhere." Marcus stood immediately, but not before placing a reassuring hand on Riley's shoulder. The gesture was brief, but Riley felt the strength and certainty behind it, the touch of someone who truly understood. Over the following nights, Marcus and Riley developed an unspoken routine. The young sergeant would wait in the lounge during Marcus's rounds, and they would share quiet conversations about everything except the war. Marcus spoke about Emma's soccer games and her latest art projects, while Riley talked about his plans to study engineering once his leg healed properly. But sometimes, in unguarded moments, deeper truths emerged. When Riley mentioned the guilt of surviving an IED blast that killed his squad leader, Marcus's response carried the weight of personal experience. "The dead don't want us to stop living," Marcus said quietly. "They want us to live well enough for all of them." Riley studied Marcus's face in the dim hallway light, recognizing something familiar in those steady brown eyes. At home, Emma announced her upcoming school assignment during dinner. "We have to write about our hero," she said, bouncing in her chair with excitement. "I want to write about you, Dad." Marcus nearly choked on his rice and beans. "Mija, I'm just a janitor. Pick someone important, like a firefighter or a doctor." Emma's face fell. "But you're my hero, Dad. You take care of people and you take care of me. That makes you important." Marcus felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. He had spent years convincing himself that anonymity was safety, that being nobody special protected both him and Emma. But his daughter's unwavering faith in him stirred something he thought he had buried forever in the sands of a distant desert. 3 days later, Marcus noticed the tension in Riley's shoulders as soon as the sergeant entered the hospital lobby. Riley's usual calm demeanor had been replaced by nervous glances over his shoulder and fidgety movements that spoke of trouble brewing. During their midnight conversation, Riley finally confessed what was weighing on him. Before his deployment, Riley had borrowed money from some local guys to help his mother with medical bills. He had planned to pay them back with his combat pay, but his injuries had complicated everything. The men were growing impatient, and their demands were escalating beyond simple interest payments. They wanted him to use his veteran status to help them with some questionable business dealings. Marcus listened with growing concern as Riley described the increasingly aggressive phone calls and unexpected visits to his apartment. These weren't the kind of people who accepted excuses or extended payment plans. They were predators who saw a wounded veteran as easy prey, someone too proud to ask for help and too isolated to have protection. Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and doing what's right? Sometimes that choice finds us when we least expect it, in moments that will define who we really are. As Riley spoke, Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He recognized the signs of a situation spiraling toward violence, the same pattern he had witnessed in countless dangerous places around the world. Every instinct he had developed through years of training and combat was telling him that Riley was walking into serious trouble, and that trouble would find them both sooner than either of them expected. The confrontation came sooner than Marcus had feared. 2 nights later, as he cleaned the windows overlooking the hospital's main parking garage, he spotted 3 men approaching Riley near his beat-up Honda Civic. Even from 4 floors up, Marcus could read the aggressive body language, the way they had positioned themselves to block Riley's escape routes. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and moved closer to the window. Riley was shaking his head repeatedly, his hands raised in a placating gesture that Marcus recognized as the universal sign of someone trying to de-escalate a volatile situation. One of the men stepped forward, jabbing his finger into Riley's chest with enough force to make the veteran stumble backward. The tactical part of Marcus's mind automatically assessed the situation. 3 against 1. Riley favoring his injured leg. No security cameras in that section of the garage. No other witnesses visible. The men had chosen their location carefully, which meant this wasn't their first time intimidating someone. What would you do in Marcus's situation? When someone you care about is in danger, how far would you go to protect them? Marcus watched Riley attempt to walk away, but the men followed, their voices echoing off the concrete walls even though he couldn't make out the words. One of them grabbed Riley's arm and spun him around violently. That's when Marcus saw the flash of metal in the dim garage lighting. His hand was already reaching for his keys before his conscious mind had fully processed the decision. 8 years of carefully maintained invisibility was about to end, because some things mattered more than staying hidden. Marcus took the stairs 3 at a time, his janitor's uniform making no sound as he moved with the fluid precision of someone trained in close-quarters combat. By the time he reached the parking garage, Riley was backed against a concrete pillar while the largest of the 3 men held a knife to his throat. "Gentlemen," Marcus called out, his voice carrying the calm authority he had once used to command Marines in firefights. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." The 3 men turned toward him, and Marcus could see the calculation in their eyes as they sized up the middle-aged janitor walking toward them with empty hands. The one with the knife laughed. "Walk away, old man. This doesn't concern you." Marcus continued his steady approach, noting their positions, their weapons, their body language. The knife holder was overconfident. The second man kept glancing toward the exit, which meant he was thinking about escape routes. The third was reaching into his jacket pocket. "Actually, it does concern me," Marcus replied, stopping just outside their comfort zone. "Riley here is under my protection. I'm asking you politely to leave him alone." The men exchanged glances, clearly amused by what they saw as an aging janitor's delusion of heroism. Sometimes heroes aren't the ones seeking glory, they're the ones who can't walk away from someone in need. Sometimes ordinary people must do extraordinary things. The knife wielder stepped toward Marcus with predatory confidence. "You picked the wrong fight, Grandpa." That's when Marcus smiled, and something in that expression made all 3 men hesitate. Because it wasn't the smile of a frightened janitor. It was the smile of a man who had survived battles these street thugs couldn't imagine. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but would be replayed in Riley's memory for the rest of his life. The man with the knife lunged forward, expecting easy prey. Instead, Marcus sidestepped with fluid grace, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and twisted until the knife clattered to the concrete. A precise elbow strike to the solar plexus dropped the first man to his knees, gasping for air. The second attacker rushed Marcus from behind, but the former Marine had already anticipated the movement. He spun, caught the man's momentum, and used a textbook hip throw to slam him onto the garage floor with bone-jarring force. The sound echoed off the concrete walls like a gunshot. The third man, realizing this was no ordinary janitor, pulled a switchblade and began circling Marcus like a predator. This one was smarter, more cautious, and infinitely more dangerous. He feinted left, then slashed right, the blade whistling through the air where Marcus's face had been a split second before. Marcus felt the familiar surge of combat awareness flooding his system. Time seemed to slow as his training took complete control. He read the attacker's body language, anticipated each strike, and waited for the perfect opening. When it came, he moved with lethal precision. But the man was desperate now, slashing wildly with the knife. Marcus blocked one strike, deflected another, but the third caught him across the ribs. Then the fourth sliced deep into his shoulder. As he shielded Riley from a vicious thrust, the blade found his abdomen, then his leg, then his back. 7 wounds in total before hospital security arrived, drawn by the sounds of combat echoing through the garage. They found Marcus on his knees, blood pooling beneath him, but still positioned protectively between Riley and the 3 attackers. 2 of the men were unconscious, the third was crawling toward the exit, his knife hand broken. Riley knelt beside Marcus, pressing his hands against the worst of the bleeding wounds. "Stay with me," he whispered urgently. "You saved my life. Just stay with me." Marcus looked up at the young veteran with eyes that were growing dim but still fierce with protective instinct. "Take care of Emma," he whispered. "If something happens to me, find my daughter Emma Rodriguez at Roosevelt Elementary." The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as Marcus was rushed through the doors on a gurney. Dr. Patterson, who had dismissed him so casually just days before, now worked frantically to stabilize his vital signs. The wounds were deep and numerous, but they had missed major arteries by millimeters. It was as if Marcus had known exactly how to position his body to absorb maximum damage while avoiding fatal injury. Riley sat in the waiting room, his hands still stained with Marcus's blood, trying to process what he had witnessed. The man who cleaned floors and emptied trash cans had moved like a trained killer, fought like a seasoned warrior, and sacrificed himself like a true hero. None of it made sense with the quiet janitor Riley thought he knew. Emma arrived 3 hours later, her small face streaked with tears as Riley gently explained that her father had been hurt helping someone. Through the long night, Emma sat curled in the uncomfortable waiting room chair, refusing to leave her father's side even though he remained unconscious in the ICU. Riley stayed with her, making quiet phone calls to ensure her school knew about the emergency and bringing her juice boxes from the vending machine. But his mind was racing with questions that wouldn't let him rest. When Emma finally fell asleep against his shoulder, Riley pulled out his phone and began searching. Marcus Rodriguez returned thousands of results, but when he added military service to the search terms, something extraordinary appeared. The first hit was a Medal of Honor citation from 2016, but the accompanying photo made Riley's blood run cold. The man in the dress blue uniform was definitely Marcus, but the name was different. Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos, United States Marine Corps, Force Reconnaissance. The citation described actions during a firefight in Helmand Province where Santos had single-handedly held off an insurgent assault while evacuating wounded civilians from a medical clinic. He had been presumed killed in action when the building collapsed during the battle. Riley's hands trembled as he read the details. Marcus had apparently died 8 years ago, but here he was, alive and working as a janitor under a different name. The combat skills Riley had witnessed suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't just a former Marine, this was a decorated war hero who had somehow faked his own death. Sometimes the people who've seen the most darkness work the hardest to bring light to others. Sometimes heroes hide in plain sight because the weight of recognition is heavier than the burden of invisibility. Dr. Patterson approached Riley during her rounds, her expression troubled. "The man's injuries are extensive but precise," she said quietly. "It's almost like he knew exactly how to take those wounds without dying." Dawn broke over the hospital with an unusual commotion in the main lobby. Riley woke to the sound of crisp footsteps echoing through the corridors, a rhythm he recognized from years of military service. Through the waiting room window, he saw them approaching. 6 Marines in full-dress blue uniforms, their bearing unmistakably ceremonial yet purposeful. Colonel James Mitchell led the formation, his chest decorated with ribbons that spoke of decades of distinguished service. Behind him walked a Marine chaplain, a sergeant major, and 3 junior Marines carrying a folded American flag and a wooden presentation case. The hospital staff stopped their morning routines to stare as the procession moved through the hallways with solemn dignity. Dr. Patterson met them at the ICU entrance, confusion evident on her face. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours don't begin until 9, and Mr. Rodriguez is still unconscious." Colonel Mitchell removed his cover and looked directly into her eyes. "Ma'am, this man isn't Mr. Rodriguez. This is Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos, Medal of Honor recipient, presumed killed in action 8 years ago. We're here to correct a grave error." Riley gently woke Emma, whose sleepy eyes widened as she saw the Marines filling the hallway. The colonel knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but filled with profound respect. "Young lady, your father is one of the finest Marines who ever wore the uniform. He saved 43 lives in Afghanistan before we lost track of him. We never stopped looking. The greatest heroes often were the most ordinary faces, living extraordinary lives of quiet service that go unrecognized until moments like these reveal their true nature." As the Marines filed into Marcus's room, Emma whispered to Riley with sudden understanding and fierce pride, "My dad really is a hero, isn't he?" Marcus opened his eyes to find Colonel Mitchell standing at attention beside his hospital bed, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and illuminating the dress blue uniform that brought back a flood of memories he had spent years trying to forget. Emma sat in the chair beside him, her small hand wrapped around his bandaged fingers, her face glowing with a pride that made his heart ache. "Sir," Colonel Mitchell said, stepping forward with military precision. "Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful nation, we want to welcome you home. You've been listed as missing in action for 8 years. We never stopped believing you were alive somewhere, continuing to serve in your own way." Marcus tried to speak, but Emma placed her finger gently on his lips. "I know now, Dad," she whispered. "I know why you couldn't tell me before. But I want everyone to know how brave you are." Dr. Patterson stepped forward, her previous dismissiveness replaced by profound respect. "Mr. Santos, we would be honored if you would consider a position as our veteran liaison. Your understanding of what these men and women face is exactly what our program needs." Riley moved closer to the bed, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved my life in more ways than one," he said quietly. "I want to help other veterans the way you helped me." Marcus looked around the room at the faces surrounding him, each one reflecting back the recognition he had spent so long avoiding. For the first time in 8 years, he felt truly seen. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from around the world. Heroes walk among us every day, wearing ordinary faces and doing extraordinary things. Thank you for sharing this journey with us, and please subscribe for more stories that celebrate the hidden heroes in all our lives.